Hi everyone, my name is Kateri and I'll be presenting to you my paper on Afrocentric education. So first I'd like to start by defining Afrocentric education. Philosophies that define the framework of Afrocentric schooling support the educational enhancement of African American populations by developing a strong educational foundation of their historical, social, and political influences, as well as fitting educational practices that meet their needs so that they may have equal opportunities in the societies in which they grow and establish themselves. So in this presentation, we'll look at Afrocentric theory and their similarities and differences. 2, we'll look at a history, and that will be within the United States as well as Canada. 3rd, we'll look at challenges of Afrocentric theory, so that from the perspective of dominant culture, and that from the perspective of the actual implementation of Afrocentric education. 4th, Afrocentric theory in practice. So here we'll look at 2 areas of the United States, Atlanta and Washington, D.C. Last, concluding remarks, and I'm going to finish today with a video that I feel really emphasizes the necessity for multicultural education in our classrooms. So I thought it'd be interesting to define education. So education, as we know, is providing our students with the knowledge and tools to lead successful lives. And it was interesting here, looking at synonyms, the connection made between education and culture. And education itself is a culture, and with all its participants, they bring in their own experiences, adding to that culture, providing our students with a strong, rich knowledge base and experience, giving them excellent tools for their future lives. So some Afrocentric theorists include W.E.B. Du Bois and Carter G. Woodson. And some of these theorists may have differed in their method of implementation, whether it be through public stream or independent schools. But the one thing they did agree on, that it had to include Black history, language, and culture. And their ultimate goal was to eliminate segregating practices, to completely abolish these practices in society. Afrocentric theory also aimed to allow children to see themselves on a national and global level through education. And it suggested that all concentrations of the curriculum have Afrocentric theory embedded into them in order to have its full effect. So here we are emphasizing the connection between culture and education. According to social reproduction theory, educational systems socialize clients to accept existing structures of power and symbolic relationships through the selective transmission of power and privileges. Hence, an educational system contributes to the reproduction of class structures and social relations. So just briefly, looking at the history, it has existed for over 200 years in the United States, and we see history repeat itself often. So especially with its implementation and some of the challenges it faces. Early on, Martin Delaney saw that education should both liberate the mind and teach people the skills needed for economic survival. He also postulated that education could be used as a means of moral suasion to change the attitudes whites held towards African Americans. When we realized that this last postulation was not to be the case, Delaney changed his views radically. He began to argue that blacks needed to control their children's education, and that race and ethnicity should be the central constructs for the study of the African American experience in the United States. Similar of contemporary Afrocentrists, Delaney argued that education should also be used to refute racist, colonialist perspectives. So going into the civil rights movement, we see another strong emphasis on African American education, also aiming at abolishing segregating practices in American society. There's the challenge of its implementation in the public stream, where we see African American teachers, administration losing jobs to dominant culture, which really has a detrimental effect on the impact Afrocentric education should have. Also, we see with government the improper allocation of resources, which was another challenge for the implementation of Afrocentric education. In Canada, Afrocentric education has existed since the late 19th century. More recently, there was a school opened in September of 2009, the Afrocentric Alternative School, which is a K-5 school. And also in 2011, a secondary school, and it also aimed to provide an education to African American students that mirrored their culture and belief system. So the implementation of these schools was directly upheld by choice policy, which aimed to support minority groups within the province, such as First Nations, through which these policies stood to empower these groups, providing equal opportunities. So initially it was fought, but it wasn't until the early 1990s that Afrocentric education began to make headway. So in Ontario, we saw the need for Afrocentric independent schools, as we saw that it provided the necessary methods and ideologies to gain the best education possible for African American students. The proper establishment of tools and administrative support at the government and school levels are well created and for a strong foundation for the implementation of Afrocentric independent schools and policies. So here we see a father's firsthand account of his children's experience in the Afrocentric school that we discussed, the K-5 school.
All right. Well, Ainsworth, you're one of those parents. You have kids at that school. Well, what do you hear from them? What does the day look like there as opposed to a day at any other school?
Well, for my boys, Azel, that's in grade 5, and Makai in grade 1, they're very excited about coming to school and being in that space. There's an enthusiasm that they have in terms of wanting to be in the space and feeling that they are part of something, and they're visible within the space. I know for any parent, one of the most important things when you're sending your child to school, you want to make sure that they're safe, that there's a nurturing environment, and also that they're visible, that people are welcoming them, people have high expectations, and they feel that they're a part of a community. They feel that they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And the enthusiasm of being in the space for them has been beyond my expectation and my wife's expectation. Within the first month of being in the school, we were going out to eat as a family, and my boys, Azel had his jacket on, and we were going into a restaurant, and he said, "Dad, I want to take off my jacket." And I'm like, "Why?" Because I want everyone to see my uniform. So he was really proud for people to know that he's a part of this, because he's been made to feel very welcomed in that space.
Why do they wear uniforms?
So challenges of Afrocentric theory. So looking from dominant culture, really it threatened already established practices within society and threatened what they had already established for years. So really giving voice to multiculturalism and threatening their privileges. So really, looking on the other side of that, this is a very positive change in dominant culture. So some of the challenges faced in the implementation of Afrocentric education. First of all, it threatened the teaching jobs of African Americans, which had a detrimental effect on the success of the implementation of Afrocentric education, as it really requires people to be well established in the culture and history in order to really provide a strong education for these students. Also, a lack of strength in administration and teaching staff, where they're not sharing one vision, not working together, and that really can be detrimental to the implementation of Afrocentric education. So looking at theory and practice, first in Atlanta, the implementation of Afrocentric education had found great success because it did have strong support, strong administrative support, strong community support, and the resources were provided to it, the necessary resources in order for it to be successful. Then we see Washington, D.C. that shared the same demographics. There was a high population of students and African American students and teachers in Atlanta as well as in Washington, D.C. But the lack of community support, the lack of resources was detrimental to its implementation. So in conclusion, Afrocentric schools serve to embody the history, culture, social, and political values through its curriculum for the purpose of setting a foundation for its students that is effectively delegated to enhance their right to equal opportunity and eliminate segregating practices. From the evidence provided, we can conclude Afrocentric education in its fullest and most effective form is through the independent establishments. In order to answer to the educational needs of the African American population, independent schools serve to establish a common ideology in which their educational needs and foundation are supported to effectively provide them with equal opportunity and reject segregating practices within and outside of their communities. So here is the video that I was telling you about based on our previous discussions, especially discussing culture, character development, multicultural education. This really emphasizes the necessity of multicultural education in the classroom from an educator's point of view.
Why do we hate?
We hate because we're taught to hate. We hate because we're ignorant. We're the product of ignorant people who have been taught an ignorant thing, which is that there are 4 or 5 different races. There are not 4 or 5 different races. There's only one race on the face of the earth, and we're all members of that race, the human race. But we have separated people into races so that some of us can see ourselves as superior to the others. We thought it would work, I guess. It hasn't worked. It has been bad for everyone. But it's time to get over this business. There is no gene for racism. There's no gene for bigotry. You're not born a bigot. You have to learn to be a bigot. Anything you learn, you can unlearn. It's time to unlearn our bigotry. It's time to get over this thing, and we best get over it pretty soon. I'm an educator, and it is my business as an educator to lead people out of ignorance. The ignorance of thinking that you're better or worse than someone else because of the amount of a pigment in your skin. Pigmentation in your skin has nothing to do with intelligence or with your worth as a human being. It's time to get over that.
So really not only skin color, but as well as practices, cultural practices and beliefs. We should see no difference. So I hope you found this presentation informative. Here's a list of my references, and thank you very much for your time.